streaming. Alright, everybody. Today is November 6th, 2017. This is the disclaimers by Edward Johnston. And there's going to be no opening audio today because technical difficulties with our conference call program. So, Ed, go ahead and take it away.
I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight, taking the time out of your schedule to join us. We are thankful and grateful. It's all about proper education of knowing what the truth is compared to the fantasy that TV media wants it to live, from Disney channels to even mainstream channels. The one thing I want to open up so people comprehend: 1 USC Code 8. What is a person? What is a human being? What is a child? What is an individual? I want you guys to look this up and read it. An individual, a person, a child is when they breathe, they come to life. If a child did not come to life before they became and saw the light to breathe air, I don't want to hear this bullshit that you got a tumor or a parasite in your body that's eating you up till it becomes a life form. Don't work that way. I don't have this bullshit of religion of fantasy. Okay? When it comes down to the bottom line, comes down to when a child's born, that's life. When it's in the woman, it's her body. She has a constitution right to her body. The Constitution is equal to man and woman. That doesn't mean that your Bible from a foreign country gives you the right to dictate to somebody else how to live. It even says in your Bible, thou shalt not preach to another. Thou shalt not tell somebody else how to live. Not only that, it says in your King James Bible. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, that's right. Thou shalt not tell somebody how to live, and we're supposed to respect one another, so we're supposed to have honor. But, you know, religious people and Christians don't have honor, because if they had honor, they wouldn't tell, especially Christians. You wouldn't tell somebody else how to live out of a piece of book instead of having compassion and emotions and feelings. Not feelers. There's a difference of feelings and feelers by the state corporations. Personal and financial gain by what an attorney wrote, by a corporation wrote, by administrative rule wrote for your personal and financial gain. These are things that we don't get into, that people lie, cheat, and steal. And I will say it, most Christians, majority of Christians, majority, not all, there are few honorable Christians, just like there's a few honorable elected and public servants. There's a few honorable cops, police. But the rest of them, they ain't honorable. They lie, cheat, and steal. Then they go back and says, oh, God's going to save me if I pay my penance to the church. I pay for freedom. I pay for my forgiveness. Look in the mirror, moron. Don't work that way. I want to get into, the thing is that the main thing is, I'm going to make it a short one tonight, but I want to get into property rights. This is the point that people don't realize, that when you have a driver's license, registration number, social security number, when you grew up as a child, and when you had a motorcycle or bicycle, mainly bicycles, you would go to the city or county, and they would sit there and go, well, give me your social security number, or we'll give you a new registration number. So we'll tattoo that and basically punch it in the bottom of the motorcycle or bicycle, if you're young. Motorcycle that's under 18 years old, that you used to be able to get it punched in your bike as the registered owner. You didn't have to have a driver's license. You did not have to have permission to travel on the city roads or the city streets, period. It was a right back then, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago. But by these men and women who are not responsible for their own attitude, their own children, they like to lie, steal, and steal, and that's what they do. Oh my God, I did this, and now, well, what the kids, they want to sit there and go, because They're punishing kids for what they did when they were a kid. And I see that. I grew up in Marin County, and I watched a lot of that growing up 20, 30 years after the point, where people were punishing kids for what they did when they were their age. And I could honestly say, can you say moron? We have to start being realistic. I mean, that's the point. How do we be realistic? And having respect for one another. We cannot interpretate what somebody is saying. We have to read the paperwork that's in front of us. So when you're sitting there and saying that, oh, I'm a person, that means you're not a lawful American, you're not a legal citizen, you are a corporation. Citizen is an obligation under the Immigration Act. Read it, learn it. I'm not going to read all the structure to you tonight, but I will walk you through some of the administrative rules. So that goes by an affidavit. An affidavit must contain the following. A matter must be expressed to be resolved. So that means if you're lawful or legal citizen, lawful bloodline American versus legal citizen, you have to put in the affidavit what needs to be resolved. If you're a legal citizen and if you paid your income and your state taxes and your property taxes, your income taxes, by law, that immigration must pay. There's no out on this one for immigration. I don't give a damn what all these foreign people want to tell you on the internet and stuff. So long as that you pay your rights, comprehend what I just stated there, pay your rights. This goes back to the Treaty of 1213 and the Treaty of 1871 with the Vatican, with the British government, the Vatican to the United States, we the people. So long as you're paying a privilege of your elected and public service, now you have rights. Now, American bloodline Americans going back lawfully, going back to the Civil War, let's say even 1800s, have rights mandatory. It's not a privilege to pay. We have that in our structure. That's been proven. It's knowing the separation of what lawful and legal. Legal is British government. Lawful is constitutional rights. So when you pay for your rights as an immigrant, pay for your rights. Remember, people go, oh, I'll go to the church. I'm going to pay for forgiveness to the church. I pay my structure to the church. I am entitled now. No, wrong. You pay for your rights of your property tax. This is called citizenship or national, and I've argued with people here in the last 2 days over nationalism. And I try to explain to them, prove to me, and I've asked people to prove to me what nationalism, what they think compared to what it says by statute codes and administrative rules. And all they did is prove to me what I told them what was this, and they're trying to tell me I don't comprehend what they're trying to tell me. And if you actually read nationalism, is what I quoted on the internet and the structure we do in our writings, it's the same thing these men and women quoted to me, and they're trying to argue with me. And I'm finding out that most of these people are foreign agents from a foreign government, including called democracy of the Democratic Party, going to political people who have ran for office past, presently, and present, trying to convince people that they have a right, and then when you get to your court system, called the Elected and Public Employees Union System, claiming that you have a right to go to court. Well, the only ones that have a technical right to go to court is lawful bloodline Americans. Legal citizens, you're on the throne of a judge that can make the decision of what he or she decides. And it's knowing the jurisdiction when you go into court if you're lawful or legal. That is your responsibility to know that. And once you know that, it's your responsibility to educate your children. I support homeschooling, absolutely. I do believe in homeschooling. Excuse me. I believe that you should educate your children, especially on the Constitution, statute, codes, and administrative laws. The state ain't going to do it. They're going to tell your children this is the way it is, and if they don't follow through, it's a dictatorship. So if they don't follow through with their dictatorship that the state elected and public servants are making to them, that's how the Department of Human Services, DHS, or any other foreign agency could get a phone call to Grand Theft Auto your property. Remember, your child, or male, female, indifferent, when it came from you and a woman, is and absolutely is your bloodline. That means you have a lawful right to that bloodline until technically it's 16. In some states, it could be up to 14 or lower to 14, but the average is 16. And then the highest is 18 when you become an adult. But back then, you got to look back, going back to the 18 and 1700s, 150 to 300 years ago, when a native was born. That means a bloodline child or man, or boy, as some might see, or girl, as some might see. That when you hit 16 years old, 15, or maybe 13 years old, you are considered an adult, how to respond and deal with things, how to act, how to survive. Well, when you're not instructed how to survive, and you get out to the woods and you're going for deer or an elk or something else for food resources, the locals have no right to speak up, trying to claim, people say, well, that's discrimination if they speak up. No, it's not. Discrimination is technically, if you really do the research, is religion. I don't believe in Roman Catholic Bible. I do not believe in a King James Bible. I do not believe in a structure of foreign government that came to the United States of 48 states to dictate to us by their paperwork. So I don't believe in the Bible, as some would say. I believe in instruments that have been produced prior to that, during that, and after that, that guaranteed man and woman and child their guaranteed freedom. Those are instruments that were prepared. The Bible was a book, and it goes back to a summary that was written that gave, forgive me, that gave man, woman, and child a privilege to live in the standards of what they would call King James or Roman Catholic Bible or whatever you want to call it. You ended up with a privilege to live that way instead of a right. You have a right to that animal. You have a right to stand up to that animal. Because remember, that animal, you own it. That's like your bloodline, your male and female child. If you follow your bloodline to that child, you own it. Man and woman, equal rights. No welfare, no child support, this ain't a game. Either you love your child or you don't. I get tired in watching, I've watched hundreds of videos the last few weeks dealing with men and women going to children in court and all this stuff. And a few I've talked to, and I've gone off on the phone on them, as well as they've literally gone off the phone on me by my conversation. And then, and some of these men and women, mainly some of the women, I was blessed that are educated after they called me 7 to 14 to 20 days afterwards the incident. Went through this even before Christmas. I was bringing stuff out. So they called me up, and so it's like, okay, I don't want to get into this tit for tat stuff. Tell me how we're going to survive it. How are we supposed to educate it? I don't want to listen to the BS that this man did this and a man did that, and you're the woman, and you did this and you did that. Who gives a rat's tail? When it comes down to it, either you're in love or you're not. And if you're not in love, quit playing the heart rate game. Been there myself, done it. I don't believe I actually played that on somebody, but I've had that played many, many times on me. because when I was younger, I definitely was a gullible guppy, like some of us are. But I want to get into this. So, dealing with obtaining, following of the sovereignty of your rights. So, number 2, writing an affidavit of fact in commerce, truth is sovereignty. So, when you put together an affidavit dealing with your bloodline, dealing with a part of your history, because you got to put an affidavit on your bloodline to your child, that means that doesn't mean that you're supposed to make out with the child, doesn't mean that you're supposed to have intimate relations with the child. You might have to, kiss it. It's not sexually, not supposed to be intended that way. It's supposed to be rationally. And if you get that carried away, maybe somebody takes your life away. That means your family, your mommy, daddy, brothers, and sisters cannot bitch. They should show respect to the man or woman who had to do what they had to do, and that shows you where that man or woman was at. That's the saddest part. We live this in today. It's called Nazism, folks. People say, we don't live this way, we don't live that way. You are living in Nazi Germany to a degree, because if you don't report a crime, you don't report this, that, or that, or this or that to the boogeyman, now you're living a boogeyman fantasy. So do you have to go hide out in a shed, or can you actually go underneath the porch, or could the owner of the land finally tell this person, hey, you've been here too damn long, get the hell out? And I agree with the third one. Tell that individual, get the hell out of here. They don't have a right to be on your land or process. They didn't get a lawful warrant. That means a lawful warrant has to be done by the king of the county, the clerk of the county, the jail of the county. And if you don't get that, I'm sorry to say, you don't get life itself. You have to comprehend these things when these things come knocking on you. Excuse me. Been there. Excuse me. Please forgive me. Been there, done it, and still living part of it today. But see, the point is, today living it, totally different than when I was in it 30, 35 years ago. Literally. And I do remember being in that, and I remember in 1982, I had an offer to go into WWE wrestling back then. And I wouldn't do it because I had more intelligence instead of being a programming. So let me get into this point. So I covered number 2. Truth expresses a form of an affidavit. So number 3 with an affidavit, if you're writing an affidavit and you lie in the affidavit, that means you can be charged with perjury. That's a federal fraud lawsuit against you. The man, woman, child, even a corporation at that point can go after you. You do not lie, you do not cheat, you do not commit fraud. Some of the things we've gone through, show that men and women might not be totally, happy with by administrative rules to flaunt their body parts. But then again, when the coach comes around and says, hey, so, what are you getting upset for? You already paid for that seat. You already knew that when you sat in that seat in Halloween. You knew that when you came into that building, you autographed a permission slip. And trust me, I know Peter Wu's permission slip in our county. That says that you authorized them to do this, that, and the other thing. And my attitude was 100% going, wait a minute. Peter, I didn't authorize anything. You're telling me I have to do this because of my job. And if I don't do it, I'm fired and I lose everything. And Peter said to me, this is a true story. Peter says to me, well, I can't tell you that. Like, duh, with dumb shit tattooed on my forehead. See, there's the things that we're supposed to know by being an elder. And then when we start getting otherwise educated in other fields, we realize that we didn't have true education not only of our life system, but our elders. Without our elders, we have no future looking at possibly education of your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, comprehending these little points of life. So a truth of affidavit has to be formed in an affidavit. And once you commit a truth of an affidavit, and if you lie in it, that's a federal fraud. You can actually go to jail for committing federal fraud. Don't like to see this happen to people. I like to see an affidavit done realistically and honorable. An affidavit, unrebutted affidavit, stands truth in commerce in commercial law is basically what that means, commerce. So, if an affidavit that you file with the mayor, city council, the local police department, which I got a few of those, done locally here in my area, and if you file, excuse me, please forgive me, you file an affidavit, you want these men and women to either respond, and if they don't respond, people say, well, you should file against the medium. No, 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 no. If they don't respond, you file back to them another registered, certified mail of denying and forfeiting, and I love this word, and I've done this with a few public employees in the past, forfeiting the right to be elected in public service within 24 hours because they don't know their job and they don't comprehend what they're supposed to do. Once you file that in court, and you get a stamp, oh my God, I'll guarantee you, you're going to watch people going, toop, their head's going to bow. We don't have a problem with head bowing. We have a problem with people not being responsible. Once people are responsible, we can get rid of a lot of this stuff. And that's the fact. These are things that are fact, not hearsay, realities, so that way you have to introduce these facts. You're the one who has to produce the evidence around these facts to make sure it is a real fact.
Don't you think it's time that we should wrap it up? You're starting to fade in your speaking.
Oh, I am fading in my speech. Okay. Well, I guess we could wrap it up in the public servants, but yeah, like I said, I got called up this morning and got wrapped up into things, and so I won't deny that one. And you know, we've been doing that, but I want to get into one point in public servants. Okay? Judge, law enforcement officer, state attorney general, all various agencies, if they are not registered by the Act of 1938, 22 USC 286 sequel 2638 185G 267J 611, it's a federal crime. And you want to make sure that when you're doing your affidavits and stuff, you make sure and ask these men and women if they are registered. Do not ask them. I was talking to some people earlier today to bring up some points that they were going, well, I brought it up in court. I said this in court, and I said to them, did you file it in court? No, I didn't need to file in court. All I had to do is talk about it in court. And I said, no, you have to realize that you have to put this in writing to the court, to the clerk, because if you don't put it in writing, it's hearsay evidence. It's not a fact. So when you're doing these stuff for facts, and thank you for correcting me too. I know I was getting off there. But you have to put these things in writing. You cannot go to court. It's like, you know, there's a lot of court cases that you and I and other people know that's going on in Nevada, that happened in Oregon, other territories and other states, where people get into these things going off in these structures. And it's like, well, they didn't accept the Constitution. They didn't accept this in court. Folks, the main reason you have to comprehend, when you speak in court, they cannot accept hearsay evidence. That's called hearsay evidence. You are not a man or woman to be represented in those type of courts. Those courts are maritime courts of a foreign body on ocean, not land. So when you're bringing hearsay evidence as a foreign agent to that structure, Foreign Agent Registration Act 22 USC 612, that's what you're talking about. So when you're bringing in foreign registration into that structure, you're missing a point here. You're bringing in hearsay evidence that's inadmissible to the court. And that's the point that people have got to comprehend, that if you don't file it, put it in writing, file it with the clerk's stamp, with the clerk's seal on it. If you don't have the clerk's seal on it, that's not admissible in court. That's hearsay evidence. That's like a district attorney. A district attorney cannot file an affidavit in court. And that's where when you go into court, it doesn't matter if you're going into court for a traffic ticket or a crime. Remember, a crime is a crime. That means personal and bodily injury, theft, personal property damage. A crime is not a traffic ticket, administrative rule, walking through the park, going through something like that. Those things are not a crime. A crime has to be an injured man or woman or property damage. It only can be considered a crime. And a crime has to be followed by an affidavit. If there's no affidavit put into the record by the injured man or woman, district attorney, state attorney general, a judge, attorney cannot issue an affidavit in your behalf. You have to write your own affidavit and put that admissible into the court. If you don't put that admissible into court, that is called a hearsay witness, hearsay evidence. And people wonder why it's like, some of the new child offenses that come out in Hollywood here in the last few months, which I'm glad to see some of them are speaking up and these people are bringing out. And I've talked to a few people personally, and some people I've sent messages to. But if you don't put that in an affidavit and stand up as the injured man, woman, child back then, and prove the case, it's hearsay witness. You have no evidence. You have no standing in these matters. So it's comprehending how our court system works lawfully and legally, and knowing what a British court system is on land, and knowing what a lawful court system is by the Constitution on land. The one thing is, the major part that people don't get, it is the duty of every lawful bloodline American to oppose all enemies, foreign and domestic. Read the Enemy Act of 1917. That will walk you through different things. You got to look at these points of view, walk through and educate yourself on these things. And remember, this includes doctors, nurses, and healthcare providers. They're a part of the structure. Either you are a protector of men and women, that is lawfully, or you are, if you're not registered by the Foreign Administration Act of 1938, you technically are an enemy to the country. You're a terrorist. And it's the way that people need to file these things and comprehend these things to see what it is, what the facts are. So, yeah, I know I drifted off there for a minute. I appreciate you getting me back on track. Like I said, it's been a long week, and I do apologize for people that there's some things I'm not going to cover tonight that I intended to. I'll have to make that up next Sunday. But, it's like I tell people, please don't call me until after 10 a.m., 11 a.m. When you start calling me at 7 and 8 o'clock in the morning, sometimes I don't get to sleep until 5 o'clock in the morning. And when you start calling me at 7, it's one of those things, Go ahead.
Don't you think you should clarify what time zone, 10 or 11?
Oh, thank you for the correction, yes. I'm on the West Coast. I do get people that are from Florida and New York City and stuff that their clock says 11 o'clock. They'll call me, and it's a 3-hour time zone difference. And thank you for the correction. I respect that and appreciate that. You know, but people got to look at when they call for their act compared to what they're calling from another area. When you're from an East Coast, even if you're calling from, some people have called me from overseas. I don't normally deal with overseas people when it comes down to a lot of structure because of Immigration Act and lawful structure, because that goes back to the Foreign Administration Registration Act compared to the treaty and the Trading with the Enemy Act of 1917. But it's looking at the time zones where you're at. You know, I mean, I ended up having a conversation with somebody earlier, and it's like, you know, you called me at 7 o'clock this morning, and it was like, well, it's 10 o'clock here, and I'm going, yeah, you're in, what? You're on the East Coast, I'm on the West Coast, there's a 3-hour time difference. And I love it when people say, well, go back to sleep. Well, it doesn't work that way. When you're disabled, you know, most disabled people, when they're woke up, even if you're even normal, it doesn't matter if you're disabled or not, some people, when they get woke up, when people don't think, you know, you can't go back to sleep. It sort of interrupts your daily schedule. It's not being rude. It's one of those things we don't think about. We don't comprehend. We forget about that of our fellow man or woman. Those are things that we live with, but it is learning structure. And I want to get into on your property rights here, on your bloodline mainly. That was the main thing I wanted to get in tonight. Child Protective Services, remember, your child is your bloodline property. Now, either your lawful American bloodline, and that goes back 5 or more generations. Now, if you're a legal citizen or national, and I've had this conversation in emails today in the last 2 days with people dealing with national, and they're going, well, I don't care about what the law says. I'm going by national. Well, go by national. I don't have an issue with you going by national or citizen, but remember, when you end up in a court system and you're using national citizen, that means you're a foreign agent to the soil. That means you have no rights, period. End of story. There's no fantasy with that. You're claiming you're a national or citizen. Look up the terminology of national citizen. That means that you belong to an organization that bows their head down. I don't worship. I don't bow my head. And if you're claiming national citizen, that means you worship something else. And it doesn't matter what God you believe, what Bible you believe, whatever your belief is or fantasy is, or whatever your religion is. The bottom line comes down to, if you're going to claim something, you know, you should be claiming your bloodline. Your bloodline is not a religion. Your bloodline came, the way I look at it, came from the Great Spirit and Mother Earth. You might say it came from God. Okay, let's say it came from God. But I hate to tell you that God didn't have that child, the woman did. If it wasn't for the woman, you would not have that child. That's the main point that men and women don't get of the crap that they lied to me on the internet, and they lie to themselves. Without a woman, there is absolutely no life. And you're going to sit there and tell me a Bible says that the woman doesn't have right to her body, that I, the man, I own her? Because the Bible, King James Bible, says I own the woman. She's my slave. What it really says. People, don't lie to yourself. Quit playing the game. Let's be realistic. I argue with people all the time on the internet and phone conversations. You know, and they tell me, well, the woman has the right to her body, but the minute she's pregnant, the right belongs to God. Well, here's a reality check for people. Well, if God is the judgment, and God is the man that's supposed to make the judgment call on the woman, not you, man. Man is not supposed to make judgment call, nor is women. But isn't it say in your Bible, God shall judge? So let's talk about your book that you believe in called the Bible, God shall judge. So if God shall judge, who gives you the internal right to speak up? Who gives you the right to judge how a woman reacts with her body? You don't have that right. That's a reality point. You don't have the right. Oh, well, the Bible says this, the Bible says that, and it doesn't matter what religion. I'm not going to get into religion, because you get into religion like that, that's called racism. If you actually do the terminology of what racism really is, it is religion, not color of skin. If you actually read the Constitution for once in your life and you start putting that together, you realize black, Chinese, Russian, yellow skin, red skin, purple skin, white skin, whatever, we are equal. There's no such thing as racism in the Bible. Oh, that's right, the Bible gives you racism. I meant the Constitution. The Constitution gives you no racism. The Bible sure the hell does. But the Constitution is supposed to be equal. Men and women are treated equal under the Constitution. Yes, I use the word under, and that's the one thing I don't like using that word. But when it comes to the word under, when it comes to that point, I have to use it that way, because under the Constitution, men and women are equal. And if you go by the Constitution, man and woman are equal. You want to go by religion, women have no rights, period. That's what religion means. I don't care what you say. Read the damn Bible. It even tells you in the Bible that women don't have rights. Seriously does. And then you want to argue, oh, the woman had a child, she's pregnant, she's 3 months pregnant, I can't kill that child. That's not your decision. She has to live with that parasite. That parasite's living off of her internally. It's her right, her decision. And if the man made the wrong decision with the wrong woman, sorry to say that, folks. But that's reality. Where's the respect? How come there's no common courtesy to the woman? That's the one thing that how many men wake up in the morning that will bring the woman a cup of coffee in the morning when she wakes up in the morning, surprise her with breakfast in bed, give her a hug in the morning. Hey, sweetie, I remembered, you have my child here. I appraise you for having our bloodline. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have blood. We don't look at these things. We get so wrapped up, and a lot of people get so wrapped up into the devil's Bible book, that I call it, that they don't look at their bloodline, their contract, their ownership of line. If you don't claim ownership to your bloodline, you don't own yourself. You don't own that child. You don't own your blood. And you have no future of your bloodline to exist. We are living in interesting times today where they're trying to do genocide on us today. They got House and Senate bills for genocide that have passed. We got videos on new.org and trackers. We're getting more up there. We can watch the House and Senate, where these men and women are passing bills to actually murder men and women. And people say, oh, that's okay because Jesus Christ says it's okay. It's in the Bible. Sorry, I don't believe in the Bible that says that stuff. Period. If a man or woman has the right to live, no religion has the right to dictate to somebody else how to live, or their child. Period. Nobody has the right to dictate to the woman of the Bible that says a woman has to sit there and do what I tell her. If you don't have respect for the woman, how do you expect the woman to have respect for you in the morning or the afternoon? People don't think about these little things like that when it comes down to it. So when it comes down to a national or a citizen, that's called the enemy of the state under Executive Order 2040. These are things that people need to start reading and comprehending. And originally, the 13th article of amendment to the Constitution says attorney, anybody in legal points of view. Legal, remember, legal is British government. Legal is not the United States of 48 states of we the people. And I say 48 states because the 49th and 50th state that they call, Canada, Alaska and Hawaii, and then they put in the 51st state called Puerto Rico. Those are under Administration Act. They are not part of we the people. They're part of the Corporation Administration Act. And that's where people need to comprehend these points of view. It's like people will sit there and go off on the 14th Amendment and say the 14th Amendment doesn't give anybody any rights. It enslaves you. Well, the 14th Amendment, so long as you are native or national, if you actually read the damn thing, Instead of lying to yourself like all these other organizations I argue with on the internet, and even been on our talk shows arguing with them, if you actually read the 14th Amendment, it says citizens are national. So if you're claiming to be a citizen or national, that means you're an enemy to the country. You're not an American. You're a British subject. It says in there clearly that, what is it called? Native born. Not birth. It says natural native born. And if you go to natural native, and if you actually work up the word native, that means 100 years or more prior born. So if your bloodline goes more than 100 years, that means you're native, that means you're lawful, that means you're not legal. How come, to me, it's like stepping out of the production. It's like I recommend, watch the movie Interstate 60. It'll open your eyes to some of the court structures. But when it comes to native structures like these points, when you look at these points, how can you not see it when you read it? You know, Section 1 of the 14th Amendment clearly states, compared to 2.15, says that you're natural. This is part of the 14th Amendment. And I get so disturbed when I get all these emails and these Facebook things that I watch where people try to tell me the 14th Amendment is a devil, it doesn't say this. Read the damn thing. It says in the 14th Amendment, if you are a citizen or national. I've argued with people and they say, well, I'm a citizen of the state. Good luck. That means you are a slave of a state corporation of the British government, of the Vatican, of your Christian religion. Look up the Christian and look up Vatican and look up Roman Catholic Church. You might see the clarification to yourself eventually. It's one in the roof. It's all the same thing. Christian Crusades go all the way back to the Vatican, dealing with the Marquis, how all that happened. I don't see how people cannot comprehend that fact, how it really works. So if you're claiming citizenship or national, it's what it actually says in the 14th Amendment. Citizenship or national. This actually says it in the 14th Amendment. So if you're claiming citizen, or I'm a citizen, I'm a citizenship, a ship is a foreign ship of an ocean, of a foreign country, that comes into our water lines, the 200-mile water lines of the United States. So the United States is a republic. We are not a democracy. Democracy says that 51% of the people says that we're allowed to marry 13-year-old children and we could have sex with them and rape them because we're married to them. That's democracy. Yes, democracy agrees with rape, rob, and pillage. That's what democracy is all about. You got cops today that run around going, you didn't pay a ticket. So democracy says we could rape you and rob you because you didn't pay your administrative fee for the privilege. Now, they're working on another tax, and part of it has already passed, and it's called the, what is that called? The tax where basically they want to charge you a tax for breathing air, for life itself. And people say, well, they can do that. They can charge you. Well, I thought the Constitution said life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So if you want to charge me for breathing air or having life, I thought the Constitution guaranteed me life by in that structure it states that. How come people cannot comprehend where it says life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? It means life means in the Constitution you're entitled to life, medical. Oh, that doesn't include it. It doesn't say medical, but wait a minute. Does it say life? Yes, it does. See, it's stepping out of the movie. Watch the production, how it does. It's realizing that, you know, in 1871 with the British contract that we ended up with, elected and public servants, so that way we're not still in a war. Supposedly we're not supposed to be in a war, rape, robbing, and murdering each other, but we're still living partly that today. That really does happen. We are still living that. An affidavit, and I've even got this, we put up the deal, an affidavit of dishonor with a clerk. If a clerk does not want to register your affidavit and stuff like that when you're filing an affidavit, You want to file on that clerk to put that clerk, that administrative person or woman. I don't like using the word person, that's devil. Man or woman, you want to file to put that man or woman in jail. When you sit there and go, oh, I'm supposed to have compassion because the Bible tells me to have compassion. I'm not supposed to do that because if I cause her harm or him harm, oh, I'm supposed to be judged for it, and I keep going, morons. They already judged you. How come you're not protecting your bloodline? You're not protecting yourselves. And then you wonder why. I mean, that's where Christianity, these people, want you to believe that you're supposed to be the underdog of these things instead of standing up for your right. Even if you're a legal citizen, a legal national. If you don't stand up for your terminology to pass your bloodline down to be lawful to legal, you don't have a right in this country. Please go immediately. We don't want you. We want honorable men and women. You know, this goes back to the Act of 1932 or 1938, USC 226. Read it. And there's one thing is that the Treasury runs the structure on your Immigration Act because immigration gets paid a salary called a debt note. So that's all part of the structure, is putting these things together, how you survive. And if you are a foreign man or woman to this country, doesn't matter. If you're not born naturally on the 48 state soil, you don't have rights. You're an immigrant. If you're born here, you have rights. But you only have rights when it comes down to fifth generation. And it's knowing when you utilize your comprehension of knowing that if you're lawful legal when you go into court. If you don't know if you're lawful legal when you go to court, you have no standing. That's called USC 605, called the Foreign Agent Registration Act. So if you're lawful, you don't have to register. If you're legal, you have to register. So when you go into court, if you pay your taxes and paid your administration rules under that USC 605, that way when you do that, you admit when you go into court what your standing is. The judge has to honor your standing. They cannot tell you that you don't have a right unless you honor the standing. When I go to court, and I've been to court, and thank God I ain't going back to court, but when I go in, I'm a lawful bloodline American. I can prove my heritage. I can prove my heritage going back to what? Oh, George Washington. But the main reason is that I can prove my bloodline going back to the Civil War because under the federal law and the Immigration Act, the 14th Amendment, was that Scott versus Durrett, can't remember the whole thing, I'll get it here. But the 14th Amendment with Scott says, and people misinterpret that because that was based on slavery and a black man. It was based on if you were born on this soil or not. If you were a natively born, read the 14th Amendment, do not interpret it. If you were natively born, remember, this goes back in the 1870s. If you were natively born in the 1870s today, that's 5 more generations of your grandchildren or great-grandchildren today, great-great-grandchildren, you have rights. Doesn't mean that it says that, oh, well, I came to this country, my children are born in the last 2 years, I have rights. No, the 14th Amendment does not clearly state that whatsoever. States back in the 18th century that your children have rights because now they're lawful and legal, and that is a federal Supreme Court of 1884, and I pass that in our newsletter out all the time so people could actually read it for themselves. It cannot be interpreted. The main thing is under 28 USC 372 is the oath of office. That means a judge, an attorney, public servant, any public contractor, anybody who gets paid by federal funding is a public contractor, a public servant. That means they don't have rights. They gave up their citizenship. Oh, what a concept. They gave up their lawful bloodline rights to become a privileged servant under March 9th, 1933, rights of privilege of employment. And that's where most people don't get it. It becomes a privilege of employment we have. When you start being a public servant, now when you are making your own income, you own your own business, you're not obligated under the Administration Act to register. You are a private contractor. You don't owe anybody nothing. You're not under government funding or government administrative control. If you have a business that is from yourself, landscaping, gardening, corporation, auto mechanic business, technically you don't need a business license. I worked many years as a certified, what they call certified auto mechanic. I never had a business license. They didn't have their paperwork. I was certified by the dealership itself, by Acura dealerships, but I was not certified by a state corporation, state or federal, but I was certified by Acura dealership itself. So I didn't need state certification. People try to get me to ask permission. I would not register myself because then that way I had to have permission from the state to have employment. When I had my certification from Acura dealership as a mechanic from them, I get a job anywhere without asking permission. And these are things that, comprehending and understanding, God, I hate using that word, but comprehending how business really works compared to what we're interpreting business is. Most people interpret what business is and what goes on compared to what we think it is. So, and that's the one thing. And the one thing is when you go to court, you don't want to ask, and I do say ask, but you could ask, but I always like to say put it in writing. You want to make sure it's in writing to the judge of that court. Is he registered with the Foreign Administration Act? If the judge is not registered, he cannot proceed in a court proceeding, period. End of story. That is administrative law of 48 states. If he's not registered, he has no authority to commence and open what they call a courtroom. Courtroom can only be registered or opened by a registered agent, foreign agent. And by the way, judges are supposed to be mediators, period. So I get that point. So anyhow, I guess I'm going to end it tonight. I would like to thank everybody. Unless anybody's got somebody to say, speak up. But otherwise, I'm going to call it a night tonight.
All participants are unmuted.
Okay, well, we'll call it a night tonight.
All participants are muted.
Are you going to say your closing statement, Ed?
Yeah, I'll do a closing statement. May the grace bless you. May Mother Earth walk with you. Grow food, collect rainwater. And remember, if it wasn't for your bloodline, you would not exist today. It takes mother and man and woman to create life. Without life, none of us would be here. So may the Creator and the Great Spirit bless you. Thank you for joining us tonight. Sorry, I'm just been a long day.
And Ed, thank you for listening to the disclaimers. It is currently November 6, 2017. And anyone who has Ed's number, to reiterate, please do not call him until after 10 or 11 a.m. West Coast time, Pacific Standard Time. So, y'all have a good night, and enjoy the rest of your week. And we will be back on Sundays at 5 p.m. West Coast Pacific Standard Time with Ed, Education by Ed, and then next Monday also. Thank you very much, and let's let Ed get his beauty sleep.